The things we talk about on this podcast, people getting followed by the cops after knitting festivals, people smuggling contraband through airport security. I might as well call it like the Knitty McPurly crime podcast. Hey knitters, welcome to episode 225 of the Knitty McPurly podcast. I'm your host, Devin AT. You can find me at KnittyMcPurly.com. I am Knitty McPurly on Instagram, and if you want to email me, I am Devin at KnittyMcPurly.com. Please subscribe, hit the like button. Welcome to those of you who are new. It's so good to see you. Perhaps see you again, perhaps see you for the first time. Welcome anyway. I am drinking my coffee this morning out of my New Orleans mug. I don't have very many city mugs, but the lovely podcast watcher from Louisiana, who also sent me a Louisiana mug, sent me this wonderful New Orleans mug. I've had a little too much coffee today already, so I'm a little like, but you guys, it is like legit cold out, which is kind of nice. When it was rainy and I had to drive my kids to a million things, I wasn't as happy about it as I am now because it's like beautiful. It's like The Simpsons, blue sky, white puffy clouds, beautiful. It's going to be 70 degrees today. Right now, it's cold, like the heat has kicked in. So I am wearing my Vesper sweater. Remember this? This is a free pattern over at Knitty McPurly with the batwing sleeves and the cinched up waist. And I have my Lori jeans on with it. If you're new, Lori from the Arkansas Yarn Co. introduced me to these jeans, and I just think they are so cute. They're from Loft. I'll link them below in case you're interested. I think they still have them. Also, I wanted to say happy birthday to podcast watcher Sydney. Happy birthday, Sydney. It was Sydney's, I think, 15th birthday this week. Is that right? Happy birthday, Sydney. Hope you had a great day. You guys loved my Severance opening from last week. I didn't talk about it in the podcast because I filmed it after and then stuck it at the beginning. For those of you who are not watchers of Severance and you were like, I don't even know what's happening here, that's fine. But it was fun. It was super easy to make that little video and a lot of fun. So when funny things occur to me, I'll put them at the beginning to kind of, grab the new folks. All right. Let's get on to progress and shop news. The Vesper sweater that I'm wearing is a free pattern, by the way. I forgot to say that, but that is true. All right, the Advent calendar pre-orders for God So Loved the World, those have sold out as of right now. So if you didn't get one, do not cry because I'm making a few extra and I will put those on the website in probably early November. For immediate shipment out with all of the pre-orders. So don't worry, I'll let you know with plenty of notice so that you can get online and purchase yours if you missed it. This was a really exciting thing that happened this week because I have been thinking since the retreat for months, I've been thinking about what am I going to do for next year's sock club? And many of you have sent me great suggestions. They all have been like orbiting and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And then this week I got a few suggestions that just thunked it all right into place in my mind. So I just want to tell you a little bit about that because that's going to be next year. I'm excited about it. It's going to be really fun. A lovely podcast watcher named Stacy sent me a suggestion saying, I didn't get in on it this year. I missed out. And so what if you did the sock project book again? And I thought, the sock project has 25 patterns in it. And this year we only knit 12. But I also wanted to do some Charlotte Stone colorwork socks. So here's what I decided. We're going to do 2 sock clubs, 2 leagues of extraordinary knitters, extraordinary sock knitters. And my daughters helped me come up with these names. For the people who want to work from the sock project book, doing patterns that are certainly not simple, but more basic. This is going to be the Yarnlings kind of the more beginner-friendly knitting sock club, and the Purl Fessers, which will be the more advanced colorwork knitting sock club. You could do both. You could do just one or just the other. Maybe you're not a sock knitter and you're not interested. Totally fine. But that's what's going to be happening next year, I think. And I'm just like, this is like the design phase of it right now, because these are going to go up probably December 1st. So something to look forward to. If you love the sock club this year or you missed it this year, next year there will be more. So not only will there be 2 different levels, but there will be more openings so that if you missed it, you can get in on it. Okay, so that is exciting. Yes, and I decided obviously, like I said, on the sock project, but also I chose Charlotte Stone's charming colorwork socks book for the Purl Fessers, the more advanced colorwork socks, because these are so fun. Like, just look how fun these are. I love knitting colorwork socks. This week I was working on some colorwork charts, and I did them like as a sock, and it was so much fun. I did it so fast. It was really enjoyable. So if you're thinking, gosh, I want to try colorwork socks, if you're in the sock club this year, we'll have some towards the end of the year, and you'll be able to try that out and see if you like it to make your decisions about next year. But I also had requests for a blanket club where you would get yarn every month to make a blanket. So a lot of people seemed interested in that. I was thinking, if we did that, I'm not 100% that I'm going to do that yet, but I like the idea and I think I could do it. I would probably do fewer of them than the sock club, unless, I don't know, it depends on the interest. But I was thinking, let me know what you think, DK weight, and we could do something like the Northeasterly blanket or the Snicket Files, blankets that you could add onto as you like. And each month it would be 5 20-gram minis to add to the blanket. And then by the end of the year, because I did the math, and for a couch-size blanket, that gets you about the right amount of yarn to make a couch-size blanket. What do you think? Are you interested? Let me know in the comments or send me an email if you're interested, and I will get going on that. Also, let me know, because you could even theoretically do whatever pattern you want, but to have some suggestions or like suggestions, I think that would be good. But DK weight is what I was thinking, because fingering weight, it might be a little tedious. It just is very thin. Could also do worsted. DK worsted. Let me know what you think. Okay. I also got a suggestion from Nan. Hi, Nan. She said that Denise DeSantis, whose YouTube name I forgot, Earth Tone Girl, I think, just put out a book called No Fear Sock Knitting. And that did just come out. So I took a look at that. It's a little pricey, and I don't mind spending $25 on a knitting book. This particular one only has 8 patterns, but I think that's because it is geared toward sock beginners. So it's going to really walk you through the process of basic sock knitting, and that's probably why it only has 8 patterns. So if you're totally new to sock knitting and you're like, I don't even know where to start, this book may be a good option. I went to go buy it, and because I am not a beginner sock knitter, I decided not to, because it only had 8 patterns and it just wasn't quite right for me. But if you're new to sock knitting, that might be a good resource for you. All right, let me show you how far I got on my Hey Sailor. So I realized we've got like a week. Is that true? There's a week left of May. Oh my gosh. This knit along ends in like a week. I don't know if I'm going to make it. How are you guys doing? Are you doing okay on your Hey Sailor? Like I said last time, it's not a super enjoyable stitch pattern to knit, and it kind of made me feel better to hear other of you say that. But I am pushed by the fact that I want the shirt, like I want the top. So this is how far. I got pretty far, you guys. I got pretty far. I am almost to the sleeve divide. but I don't know that I can make that happen in a week. It's possible though, because my junior high and my high school kids have finals this week. So their school is half an hour away. Okay. Finals take 2 hours. So if I were to drive there and drive back, I'd be home for like half an hour, and then I drive there and drive back again. So I just go and I sit in the car for 2 hours while they take their finals, and then they come back. And that's how I got a lot of knitting done this week on other projects that I'm not ready to share just yet. But I also got a lot done on my Hey Sailor. So I hope you guys are gearing up to finish by June 1st. We'll see. Okay, moving on to the topic of the week. Once again, I kind of wanted to do a little more on who owns big knitting, because you guys loved that topic. I loved it too. I loved it so much that I am making, I don't want to say some changes to my business, but I am adding in some new things. One thing was that I told you last week that I reached out to the Brittany Needles folks who have their needles, they make them in California. And they suggested to me another small business, which is their distributor. They have different distributors, but they said, this is the one closest to you. I think it's in Massachusetts. And so they said, you can get our needles through this distributor because they're another small family business. I was like, great. So I go to their website and I'm trying to use it, and it just wasn't working for some reason. It wasn't a bad website. It wasn't clunky. It was a good website. It just wasn't connecting somehow. So it says, if you have any problems, call this number. So I call this number, and just this regular older gentleman answered the phone and was like, hey, like, this is great. I'm so glad you want to do this. He's like, I'll just take your information right here. He's like, let me get a piece of paper. So he writes down all my information, and then he gets me a wholesale account. And I placed an order. So Knitty McPurly is going to be carrying Brittany needles. And when I talked to him on the phone, one of the things that he said was, they're the only United States knitting manufacturer. Now, he was wrong about that, because a lovely podcast watcher named Diane, hi Diane, said DYAK, D-Y-A-K, is an American-made needle company. And so she sent me that website. I will link that below. They make also, I believe, interchangeable needles and sets with, the cord, the cable. They're not called cable needles. They're needles with the cable, the ones with the cord. What are those called? Long knitting needles. I don't know why I can't think of it. But they make those too, whereas Brittany just makes double pointed needles and crochet hooks. So I will be carrying double points. For now, I only got crochet hooks in the G and the H because those are the most popular sizes. But if you want more sizes, I'd be happy to stock more. Just tell me what you want and I will get it for you. Now, the DYAK needles seem to sell direct on their website. So like I said, I'll link that below if you're interested in that company. But that's really cool. And it makes me think, how many more are there? Like, are there just little ones that are just being quiet, we don't hear about? I don't know. But it's great to look into it. If you know of any, please let me know, because I would love to give them a shout out. I had a couple of questions about, no one asked me about Rowan, but when I was looking for some knitting fantasies today, I found some interesting patterns from Rowan, and I thought, I don't think I mentioned Rowan last week. Rowan is owned by private equity. It is yarn brands Rowan and Patons have been sold to the Legacy Embroidery Floss Company, DMC, and that both brands are part of MEZ, which is one of the portfolio companies owned by the Aurelius Group, which is owned by the private equity firm Lion Capital. So it's just a lot of steps. And many of you said last time that you were disappointed by some brands like Jimmy Bean's Wool, Madeline Tosh. These used to be brands owned by knitters, for knitters, but they sold out. And I don't know. I understand selling out. I mean, you've built a thing, you're going to cash in on it and go live your best life. I get that. it does kind of stink for the rest of us who don't necessarily know that you sold out, but you're still kind of trusting the company the way that it used to be. I don't know. We'll talk more about it in the comments because you guys had a ton of great comments about it. Wool Warehouse, which is located in the UK, they have those Attic 24 blanket kits. And that's actually, those kits are why they started Wool Warehouse. Because back in 2011, I think it's a husband and wife, back in 2011, the wife wanted to knit one of these Attic 24 blankets. And so she told the husband, these are the colors I want. And he's like, how am I supposed to get all those? So they started Wool Warehouse. Now, Wool Warehouse is owned by a husband and wife team, but I am guessing here that probably the yarn that they get is from China because of the price. That price point means that's probably yarn from China, I think. Now, Denise Needles was another one that you guys asked me about. Denise Interchangeable Needles is currently owned by Linda Craig, who is a person. She acquired a company in 2022 from the original inventors, Lorraine and Bob Linstead, and continues to run it with her family. So her daughter and granddaughter are also involved in the business. So it seems like, yes, it's not owned by the original owners. And that was true of some of the people that I listed on the family/individual owned side. Some of them were still being controlled by the original founders or their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Others had been acquired recently, but were still owned by individuals. So that is a little bit of a distinction. Okay, let's talk about the Knit Nation newspaper. I subscribe to it. It hasn't come yet. I think it's the first issue that they're going to send me, that one that you maybe all of us have seen. But if you have subscribed, you know that that is not the only newspaper. There's Knit Nation, Crochet Nation, and Baking Nation. There are 3 separate newspapers. I looked everywhere to see who is behind this, other than Brittany Smiley, who they claim is behind it. And maybe she is. Maybe I'm just being a cynic that I just can't believe it. I feel like if it is Brittany and her husband and their beautiful little daughter running this company, they are extremely well funded. So fair enough. Maybe they were like, you know what? We're going to crush this thing. We're going to nail this thing into the ground, and we are going to just borrow a bunch of money and we're going to recoup it by making something awesome. And if that's the case, then we all need to go out there and subscribe to as many of these as we can, because that is awesome. That is the American dream. That is what this country is built upon. So I love it. For that, I am here all day long. If it's something else, I guess time will tell. It's not on the internet. I looked. The only thing I saw referencing Knit Nation that wasn't put out by them is a casting call to star in an ad for Knit Nation on a site called Backstage, which I assume is for actors looking for acting jobs. And one of the things I really liked about this ad is that it says, we want a woman, let's see, I printed it out. It was charismatic, age 45 plus, who genuinely knits or crochets. They didn't want somebody to pretend, and fair enough. Knitters know when somebody's faking knitting, like we can tell. But it was like for a 60 to 90 second video, and it paid like $100. Like it was not a big job for whoever got that job. It's been taken down now. If you're interested in the job, I'm sorry, it's not available anymore. But there is that. Hopefully I'll have it by next week and I can share it with those of you who haven't seen it yet, although many of you, I think, probably have. All right, I got another question about U.S. wool farms and spinneries. So I thought, let's look and let's see. Because when the tariffs happened, like I told you a couple episodes back, my yarn, Knitty McPurly yarn, as of right now, all of it comes from Peru. So I have a distributor who gets it off the container ship or however it gets to them and then distributes it to dyers. And he's a small family business too. And he's a great guy. Like I know these people. I've met them in person. So, but one thing he said to me is because I said, what are the tariffs going to look like? And is it going to be prohibitive? Because if it is, I'm probably going to look at U.S. wool. He said, there is no U.S. wool. And I thought, really? I mean, maybe he's thinking in the quantities that he works with, there isn't any U.S. wool in those quantities. But I don't need those quantities. I just need Knitty McPurly quantities. So I went looking for farms in the U.S. that grow, raise their own fiber, be it wool, cotton, linen, whatever, and process it in the USA. And I came up with Chesari Farms or Chesari Farms. I'm not sure how you say it, but it is in Swoop, Virginia, which is like 2.5 hours from my house. And I reached out to them and said, I looked at their stuff. They raise their own sheep. They grow their own cotton. They grow it here in Virginia. They have their own mill. I'm going to link below to 2 YouTube videos if you're interested. I thought about including them in the podcast, and I thought maybe not everybody's interested, so I linked them below. They're both very short little videos. One is the founding farmer, and just what an interesting guy he is. Like, his grandparents and parents were born in Italy. They moved here. He was born in Brooklyn, started the farm in New York. In the late 60s, he moved it down to Virginia. He's like a constitutional lawyer and sheep farmer. Like, he's just super interesting. So I was like, can I meet this guy? Can I like go hang out with him for the day? I would love that. So I reached out to them, and hopefully I will be able to carry some of their yarn dyed up in Knitty McPurly colors. How amazing would that be? Talk about it's tariff proof, it's slave labor proof, and I care less about tariffs. I care more about the slave labor. There's no slave labor involved, so I love it. Love, love. It actually costs me a little bit more on the back end, but I would have no intention of passing that cost increase on to you. They would stay at my regular Knitty McPurly prices if we can make it work. Hopefully. It's at the very beginning stages, but I love it. But when I looked, this was just the farm that was closest to me. But there are many spread all over the US. So I would encourage you, just Google it. Google USA wool or fiber farm near me or fiber mill near me. It's great. One of the things I loved is in one of these videos, which was from 9 years ago, this guy, Francis, who's the founding farmer, said, we don't need to get this stuff from China. He said, he started the wool spinning part of it and the processing part, I believe, in the 80s. And he said at that time, all of the US fiber mills were shutting down because it was going overseas. He said, well, I bought up all their equipment, and I was like, no. And everybody told me I was crazy. Like, I shouldn't do that because it's a dying industry here. He's like, doesn't need to be dying. We need to revive it. And we can help him revive it. So let's do it. Yes. All right. Moving right along to the recommendations section. I didn't get very many from you guys, but I will let you know what I got. Now, with movies, I was kind of thinking we could recommend movies that had come out recently, because movies that have been out for a while, many of us have already seen. However, Katie B did recommend to us Return to Me with Minnie Driver and David Duchovny. Many of us have seen that. It's a great old movie. Recently, my kids and I watched Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day is such a good movie. Like, there are some really good older movies. She also recommended, in terms of books, she recommended the Cameron Winter series by Andrew Clavin. I did read the first one, When Christmas Comes, I think, and I thought it was mid. But Katie has read them all, and she recommends them. So take that how you would like. My book recommendation for this week is Anthony Doerr. I will link these all below. But Anthony Doerr, now, the 2 books that I've read of his that are amazing are All the Light We Cannot See and Cloud Cuckoo Land. If you read these books, you would think that this is the most amazing writer you've ever read, and that he can't write a bad book, but he can, because he wrote another book called About Grace, which is trash. It's garbage. Like, it's just the worst. So these 2 books, Cloud Cuckoo Land, All the Light We Cannot See, amazing. Like, you're like, how did someone's brain produce this? So good. All right, TV show. Katie recommends Major Crimes from TNT. She thinks again from about 10 years ago. The one that I want to recommend, I don't even know if I want to recommend it because it's super inappropriate. My husband and I get pretty good with the fast forward button because we do fast forward through stuff that's inappropriate. We do not sit through that garbage, but it's still kind of an engaging show. And that is Landman on Paramount Plus. I recommend it because it's a good show. It's just interesting. However, if you don't have a stomach for inappropriate and you're not interested in fast forwarding, then just overlook that completely. All right. Before we get on to the comments section, Gigi just came in and corrected me and told me that Sydney turned 14 and not 15. Happy 14th birthday, Sydney. Didn't mean to rush you along. All right, moving on to the comments section. There were so many good comments last week. I just picked out a few of them, but there were many that were super good. Melissa says, I've recently learned about this as I was looking into the tariffs. Like, why is the U.S. increasing tariffs on some small, unheard of island? Because China and others will ship their cargo out of the small island to avoid the tariffs. So you buy something thinking that you're supporting a small country, but you're not. I'm not sure how to know where it's coming from. True that. How to know where stuff is coming from is really, really hard. And sometimes even when you ask, the distributors don't know. That's why it's good to get a straight answer from people. When you say, is this made in this place? And they say, yes, it is. Here's the paper trail. That's the best. Wise Al Knits says, great research. I use Brittany Birch cable needles and I won't use anything else. You know the little needle you use when you're doing cables to put the stitches on to twist them? She says, I am stocked up on them just in case they ever go away. They come in a group of 3, small, medium, and large. They are straight and they are narrower in the center to keep the cable stitches in place. The perfect combination of keeping the stitches secure and at the same time easy to get off the needle. I didn't order any of those. I'll have to go look and see if I can get those too. Carolyn says, thank you for the lowdown on the yarn companies. That is very interesting. I wanted to mention a knitting needle that I found at a thrift store, and the company is called Denise. I thought I was sold on bamboo needles until I tried these. They are plastic, but they have a nice texture. Slick, but not too slick. Enjoy your podcast very much. Keep it up. That is interesting. I feel Denise in my mind is like clover, like the kind of things you can get at Michael's. Did you use ones that have a cord? Because a lot of times with, I don't want to say cheaper, but craft store level needles, they get these janky cords with a lot of memory, and I just can't take them. So I'm wondering, were you using straight needles or double points? What were you using? Sharon says, I also enjoyed the segment about big yarn. I will keep that list in mind when making purchases, and I will look up the Brittany Needle Company. Yes, you can find their needles many places, but if you wanted to get them from Knitty McPurly, that will happen soon. Karen Red Baron says, I enjoyed this deep dive. I have never thought of it as big knitting or big crafting. I have a Brittany crochet hook, but it's been years since I got it, and I had no idea of the brand, so I'm glad to find out. Their crochet hooks are beautiful. They have like a turned, the back end, the part you don't use is like turned, like a turned leg kind of thing. I don't know. What are the words for these things? I don't know the words. And then she says, I wanted to say that Shannon and Rob Dunbabin are some of the most generous spirited people I've ever met in the knitting world. So they are the owners of Cascade Yarn. I met Shannon a dozen years ago at a knitting convention, and I will just keep it short and say that the longer I know her, the more genuine I think she is. I have also met the owners of Malabrigo, and I thought they were wonderful too. I know there are some really broken and divisive people in the knitting industry, as in all of life. True that. But I am happy that I have met a lot of wonderful people that I would be friends with even if I didn't knit. That is awesome. Now, is Cascade Yarn from China? I think it probably is, but again, I don't know that for sure. I'm just wondering. Because Malabrigo is a Peru and Uruguay company. So they are raising their own sheep. They're milling their own yarn there. So those things aren't exactly the same thing. Jennifer says, your segment on big knitting and who owns big knitting was so disappointing to me because Jimmy Bean's wool was on the wrong side of that list. Again, it's because they sold. That's why. Knitpicks doesn't surprise me. She says Knitty Natty actually went to Jimmy Bean's wool and toured their store, and I absolutely fell in love with that shop. And I was going to make purchases from them the next time I buy online, and now I'm not so sure I want to. I'd rather support individually owned yarn companies and yarn shops instead. I get it. That's how I feel too. And even though indie designers and indie dyers charge a little bit more, the profit supports their families and their businesses and their employees directly. So there's that. It's just something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean you're a bad person if you buy from a yarn company owned by private equity because it is cheaper. I mean, I buy stuff from Amazon and I buy stuff from, I buy jeans from wherever they sell jeans. I don't know where they're made. Sadly, this is the world we live in. But for me personally, I just want to give you this information and just in my own business to have everything that you get from me be on the up and up. Like I know where it came from. And I'll be straightforward with you about it. I will tell you, I don't want to do any China/slave labor associated with Knitty McPurly. Allison Foster said, thank you for reminding me about the advent calendar. I couldn't decide what weight I wanted to order, so I waited. I paused the podcast and got on, and I didn't have to decide because DK was what was left. I was just happy I got one of any weight. And I'm so happy to learn about the origin of Chow-goo needles. They are my favorites. Me too, Allison. Thank you for the reminder about no pressure in the sock knitting. Julie Brown gave that advice as well on one of her podcasts. I'm a very slow knitter. If I try to knit faster, I feel the pressure and not the joy. I appreciate all the information and thoughts. Please tell Gigi hello for me. I will, Allison. There are a few ladies that Gigi met at the retreat who stood out to her, who she remembers, and you are one of them. So I will be sure to tell her that you said hi. B says, it was interesting to see your list of people versus private equity. As soon as Jimmy Beans announced the sale, I ran to my local yarn store to buy a Della Q bag before the supply chain or designs got improved. Dream in Color is also one that went with the sale. Private equity can change the feeling of the brand. It would because it doesn't come from where it used to come from. Now it comes from people who are prioritizing profit. She says, I do most of my shopping at yarn festivals because it feels closer to the source. It probably is. I also do a lot of spinning from very local fleece. Much of the yarn I make is from sheep that live on my daily commute or within 10 miles of my house. That is awesome. I love that. That's just great. This has just been so much fun. Oh, also, Julie Klein of the Woolly Buffalo Yarn Co., which is a yarn store located in Plymouth, Indiana, who organizes those bus tours to YarnCon in Chicago, like Jan's story from a few weeks ago. She says she has other fun bus trips, and she's like, I would love to have you come. That would be great. Thank you so much for mentioning us on the podcast. She said, owning a fiber store has been a dream of mine, and it came true on January 1st, 2025. Congratulations, Julie. That is so great. If you are local to Plymouth, Indiana, go check out the Woolly Buffalo because she sounds great. And apparently her bus trips are just the most fun around. Last thing I want to tell you is this bind off that Tanya sent me last week that I showed, and I wasn't sure if it was Italian or tubular. She said this is the Italian bind off, but it's very similar to the tubular. So there you have it. All right, let's get moving on to knitting fantasies. Last week, I showed the Born on the Beach dress, and I was disappointed that the pictures in the listing were all sitting down. I couldn't see one standing up. So Karen sent me this picture, Born on the Beach, standing up. So again, it looks like it would be kind of a swim cover-up kind of a thing because that's a bit more lace than I would like without a bathing suit underneath. That's just me. But super pretty. I like it a lot. It would be a great knit. All right, I chose 2 knitting fantasies this week. The first one is the Jean Cardigan by Joanna Gersich. This, I believe she's a German designer, so this pattern comes in English and German. It is a DK weight, but she has held a sport weight together with like a mohair or a Surrey silk. She says, oh, mohair, she says. She's using the Garn yarn because she's German, and in Europe they use that yarn a lot. It comes in 3 sizes, extra small/small, medium/large. No, 4 sizes. XL/2XL and 3XL/4XL. So I just think it's really pretty. I would totally wear this. I love the shape. I love the fabric. I love how she covered the buttons with knitting. That's really cool. Presumably there are directions for doing that in there. I think that turned out great. I love the kind of feather and fan stitch pattern that she has going on. Super, super pretty. That pattern is €6.99, €6.99. Is that how we say it? So about €7, which is about $7. My second pick, it's possible that I have highlighted this before. I can't remember, but it's beautiful. The Stromboli by Caitlin Hunter. This comes in 49 sizes. No, I'm kidding. Let me see. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sizes. And no, 11, 12 sizes. It goes up to 185.5 centimeters, which equals some amount of inches. I don't know, can't do that calculation in my head, but wow. So the best thing about that, as we've said before, because no one exists at that size, that's not a human size. But the best thing about having a ton of sizes is that if you want to use a different gauge and you use my free gauge switcheroo worksheet, you can plug in your gauge and knit a different size, and having more size options makes that even easier. So there's that. This is a light fingering weight. She uses Yak, Koopa Baby Yak, which is 50% yak, 50% organic cotton. So it looks amazing. Looks just beautiful. It's like an all over lace and cables. Very, very pretty. I would totally, totally knit that. All right. So here's what happened. This is everybody's favorite part of the podcast, where we keep our oral knitting tradition alive and we share our knitting stories. If you have a knitting story, please send it to me. Devin with an I at KnittyMcPurly.com. That's also down below in the show notes if you forget it. But send me a knitting story. You can take a video, you can take an audio recording, you can write it out, and I will read it for you. I would love to share your story on the podcast. So please send that to me if you have one. Today's knitting story comes to us from Amy from Michigan. Hi, Amy. She says, I submitted a knitting story a while back about traveling from Mexico to the US and almost getting my knitting needles confiscated by Mexican security. This is a similar story with a better outcome. I recently traveled to Aruba. There's no direct flight from Michigan, so this requires a layover. Lots of knitting time. Before leaving the US, I was proactive. Determined to be prepared with the appropriate craft project for the trip home, I reviewed the Aruba airport security and was pleased to discover that they allow knitting needles. Woohoo! Good to go. I intended to double check with security when we arrived in Aruba, but I was exhausted and forgot. A concierge at our hotel had previously worked at the airport and thought that knitting needles were not allowed despite what was on the website. As the trip wore on, I was hopeful but skeptical about taking my knitting on the plane, which would be terrible. Like, you need your knitting on the plane. That's where you need it the most. All of my projects on this trip used ChowGoo interchangeable metal needles with 4-inch tips. In my carry-on was a pair of socks, the January League, each with their own set of needles and an extra set of tips in another size. Also, a scarf. When we arrived at the airport to travel home, before checking my luggage, I checked with a Delta representative about the needles. She didn't know and tracked down a security person to review the situation. Several people looked at my projects and declared the needles were too dangerous.
It's too dangerous.
And would not be allowed through security. Imagining myself using my tiny sock needles as a dangerous weapon was laughable. But what was I to do? Like, let's just picture little Amy with her little needles just taking over the plane. What was I going to do? She says. I was looking ahead to 16 hours of flying and waiting with no knitting. Panic started to set in, but I kept a clear head. I tucked the sock project and all of its needles into my suitcase that I checked. I removed the tips from the scarf project and I tucked one in my wallet and another in a small bag with my medications in my carry-on. I figured best case, they'd make it through unnoticed. Worst case, security would confiscate one set of needle tips and probably they wouldn't even get the set because they weren't near each other. Probably they'd get one and be like, what is this thing? With my husband whispering comments about me smuggling contraband, I quietly prayed as my bag went through the scanner. It made it. I peacefully and joyfully knit my way through that long trip home, and now I know how to get my knitting through security, and now you know too. Yes, so Amy asked more questions than I would have asked, but it worked out because you didn't ask the people who had the power in the moment to yoink them out of your hands. So I am all on board with surreptitiously hiding needles hither and thither to befuddle airport security, because you cannot take over an airplane with knitting needles. Anyone who thinks you can is insane. But perhaps wooden needles tied up like pencils or, hidden separately. I don't know. So glad you made it. International travel with knitting needles is not for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to smuggle things past security. The things we talk about on this podcast, people getting followed by the cops after knitting festivals, people smuggling contraband through airport security. I might as well call it like the Knitty McPurly crime podcast. You guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful week. Any more knitting crimes that you want to commit, send them to me so that I can read them on the internet. Have a great week, knitters. Bye.